It's good to be with you. Thank you for joining me each week as we walk through 1 Corinthians. I love this book, and I love all the things that Paul is bringing to light, obviously by the Spirit. And I love the way that this book, in such a timely manner, pokes us in places that perhaps we don't want to be poked. We're going to be looking at chapter 2, verses 6 through 16. It's a long section, so bear with me, okay? We're going to go very quickly. The main idea is this: dwell in the Spirit, rely in the Spirit, and rely in the understanding that the Spirit can give, which is the gospel. Don't rely in earthly wisdom or earthly understanding. To this point throughout the letter, Paul has been very hard on us about relying or being thinking that we have this false maturity, that because I understand the world and I understand the world around me, and because I have this higher thinking, I am superior in every way to my brother and sister. Here we're going to see Paul finally neutralize the entire discussion and basically say, you are nothing compared to what Christ has to offer. So I'm going to begin in verse 6, read the whole thing. We'll walk through it, back through it very quickly, verse by verse as we have, and I think you'll be blessed by what we find. Verse 6, we do, however, speak a wisdom among the mature, but not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are coming to nothing. On the contrary, we speak God's hidden wisdom in a mystery, a wisdom God predestined before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age knew this wisdom, because if they had known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no human heart has conceived, God has prepared these things for those who love him. Now God revealed these things to us by the Spirit, since the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except his spirit within him? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who comes from God, so that we may understand what has been freely given to us by God. We also speak these things, not in words taught by human wisdom, but in those taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual things to spiritual people. But the person without the Spirit does not receive what comes from the Spirit, because it is foolishness to him. He is not able to understand it, since it is evaluated spiritually. The spiritual person, however, can evaluate everything, yet he himself cannot be evaluated by anyone. For who has known the Lord's mind, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. So Paul very intricately has woven this theme, and he's tying it into a nice knot, that man is in no way equal to God. God is totally superior in philosophy, in everything he's done. His plan is better. Everything about God is better than us. So verse 6, we do speak of a wisdom among the mature. So there's a contrast to what came before, which is that man's wisdom said Paul needed to come as flashy as possible, persuasive, exciting. And he didn't. He came in weakness, and he came with only the cross. He only made Christ known. He didn't bring something clever. He brought the cross, which is foolishness to those who are perishing, but it's the power of God to those who are being saved. And he says, we do speak a wisdom, so tie that word wisdom, among the mature, but not a wisdom of this age or the rulers of this age, who are coming to nothing. What we have are, quote, street smarts, right? That our wisdom and understanding about the world and how to function in the world and things like that. These are all good things. But if that is what you're excited about, if that is what you are living your life based on, you are coming to nothing, because you can only gain through the gospel. So do you pride yourself in your earthly wisdom, in your ability to slickly work through life? Or do you seek the Lord in all you do? On the contrary, we speak God's hidden wisdom in a mystery, a wisdom God predestined before the ages for our glory. And I love here that we see that there's a lot going on, but the main gist here is that God's wisdom, the cross, he planned on our behalf before the foundations of the earth. Before anything else happened, God had this plan to redeem us through Christ. That Christ was never the backup plan. That God never reacted, but God proactively sought our redemption. Even before I understood I was a sinner, God had this beautiful plan for me that I could find redemption in him. That I could find value. I could find purpose. That is so much greater than anything that the world has to offer. Because that will go nowhere. But even before time, God had a beautiful plan laid out. And I love verse 8. None of the rulers of this age knew this wisdom. Because if they had known it, they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory. As it is written, what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no human heart has conceived, God has prepared these things for those who love him. So when we were part of the world, when we were not saved, we would not have gone for this plan. Basically, what Paul is saying is if the world had understood the plan, they would have rejected it. Even if God had shared to the T what was going to happen, we would have rejected it. We would have done everything backwards of the plan. Instead, God enacted the plan apart from us. He did not need my input to formulate the gospel. He did this whole thing himself, and it was better for it, and I am better off for it. As we see there later, we're going to see this was for my glory. This was previously. It's for my glory, right? It's a good thing for me that God acted this way. And as in Isaiah, Paul borrows from Isaiah there and says, look, what we didn't understand, God did. And he predestined it, and it was good. Now, verse 10. Now God has revealed these things to us by the Spirit, since the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except his spirit within him? So from here on out, we're going to get this Spirit language, that the Spirit is doing these things, and the Spirit is the one who empowers and emboldens and basically translates for us, right? Makes things of God known. And I love something about this. I'm not left to my own devices to figure out what God has done. It's not by my power that I learn the gospel. It's by the Spirit of God, the author himself. The God who wrote the gospel steps into my world and helps me understand the gospel. I don't have to be afraid that I am never enough, because I am never enough, but I can be empowered that the one who is enough helps me to understand what's going on, to understand the depths of the glory of Jesus. Who else but the author could know all these things? The Spirit can search the mysteries of God. I think he can search your heart. And I think he can know exactly what you need. And exactly what you need is the gospel. And exactly what you need is the work of the cross. You needed that redemption. The Spirit of God knows you better than yourself. And he leads you to that redemption. Now we have not received the spirit of the world. And why is it important that we don't have the Spirit of the Lord, of the world? We don't have these street smarts. We don't have a great grasp of everything around us. It's important that we didn't receive that spirit, a spirit that ultimately leads to sin, a spirit that ultimately left to its own devices is evil, right? Instead, we received the Spirit who comes from God so that we may understand what has been freely given to us by God. God sent the messenger. God made sure we would understand the good gift that has been given to us and given freely. Note, we don't really factor in any of this. Note that all the security and the beautiful things that are described here, they come from God. They don't come from me. They don't come from you. They come from God. Verse 13. We also speak these things. Again, Paul is even bashing himself here. We also speak these things, not in words taught by human wisdom, but in those taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual things to spiritual people. But the person without the Spirit does not receive what comes from God's Spirit, because it is foolishness to him. He's not able to understand it since it is evaluated spiritually. Paul says, I was brought here by the Spirit. The Holy Spirit brought the gospel to you. I'm just the vessel. I'm just the clay pot that God has chosen to bring this beautiful treasure with. And he says, people are going to see this beautiful treasure, and those who do not have the Spirit, they in and of themselves cannot understand what God has provided. I am incapable, in and of myself, of comprehending the depths of God's beautiful, glorious gospel. Because it's a spiritual thing. I don't have the tools. I don't have the capability. I don't have the holiness. I don't have the righteousness to look at what God has done and say, I understand that. But with the help of the Spirit, I can. And then we have verse 15. The spiritual person, however, can evaluate everything, and yet he himself cannot be evaluated by anyone. For it is written, who has known the Lord's mind, that he may instruct him? This is perhaps one of the more interesting pieces of this whole puzzle, because here we have a spiritual person who, because he has the Holy Spirit, can now look around. It's interesting that the Corinthians were worried about their ability to be wise in their own ways and in their own eyes be able to understand what they're seeing. And here we have the spiritual person. He can actually see. So when I thought I could see, I was really blind. And now that I've humbled myself under the Spirit, I can see. And it says he himself cannot be evaluated by anyone. And I to gain understanding there, we have to go to 16. For it is written, who has known the Lord's mind, that he may instruct him? It puts into perspective who is teaching who. Right? It's that the Holy Spirit looks at his life. When I have the Spirit, I am now able to pour out into others. But in and of myself, I can't do anything. I don't have any understanding. But it's ultimately the Spirit who's pouring out, not me. And then I love this crescendo. But we have the mind of Christ. We have the mind of Christ. That's going to be perhaps one of the most important themes throughout the rest of 1 Corinthians, is the mind of Christ, being united in the thought of Christ. So here's our application. Okay, I told you we'd keep it short this week, even though it's a long passage. Here's our application. Is we as a church, right? The church collective and the church, the individual local bodies, the small church. We gather not because we think we have this hidden knowledge that makes us in and of ourselves better than everybody else. We don't have this hidden world understanding. I don't have the right politics. I don't have the right ethos. I don't have the right whatever it is that I in and of myself created. We don't gather together because of a philosophy that your pastor has made. We gather together because we love Christ and we seek the gospel and we seek to have God's Spirit enter our lives collectively, search us out, build us up where we need to be built up, break us down where we need to be broken down, convict us of sin where we need to be convicted of sin, and teach us to better love one another and our fellow man. And we love our fellow man by sharing that gospel, by being led by the Spirit into the world, that we would do the work of the Holy Spirit, that we would bring the gospel to the people. So we gather together not because we have a wonderful wisdom that we created. We gather together because, as we see in verse 16, we have the mind of Christ. We gather together because of Jesus. So as you go through your week and as you prepare to gather together, right? And I'm emphasizing the together. I understand that everyone is in a different situation. I know that our family is in an odd situation and a hard situation with Kristen's illness. But as you seek to gather together, and I pray that the Spirit is prodding you in the most uncomfortable way possible, that you miss those that you love and that you want to gather. For those who have not come back, I understand that every situation is different, but I pray that the Lord would give you that desire to relate with others. And whether that's through phone calls or if that's through coming together physically or whatever that is, that you would reach out to your brother and sister and be of one mind, united in that Spirit who moves so mightily. And for those who have gathered together, I pray that we would be propelled by this love, this spiritual understanding of the gospel, how much love we have been given, and that we would reach out to our fellow brothers and sisters, and that we would miss them, and that we would love them. So my prayer for us collectively, you and me both, is that we would not be caught. And we are in quite the time. Things are a little crazy in the world right now. My prayer for us is that we would not be distracted from the gospel, but that we would live in the gospel, we would dwell in the gospel, and that we would seek one another in the gospel. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining me in 1 Corinthians. It's been an amazing journey so far with you. We're going to begin chapter 3 next time, verses 1 through 4. A nice short section, but I promise you it's a very full section. So until we see each other again, unless the Lord returns, I hope to see you soon.